I'm Elena. At 11:47 on a Tuesday night, I lay crumpled at the bottom of our basement stairs, my collarbone snapped, my teeth rattling loose against my tongue, staring up at the silhouette of the man my mother married. Marcus stood at the top of the landing, breathing hard, knuckles still white around the banister. And behind him, half hidden in the hallway light, was my mother, Gloria. She looked down at me, the way you look at a stain on a carpet. Not with horror, not with guilt, with inconvenience. I opened my mouth to scream for help, but all that came out was a wet, gargled sound. Blood pooled under my cheek. The concrete was so cold, it almost felt kind. And then she spoke. One sentence. Flat as a dial tone. If you'd just signed the papers, Elena, none of this would be happening. Then she turned off the hallway light and closed the door. I heard the lock click. And I lay there, in the dark, listening to my own heartbeat slow down, wondering if this was the night I finally disappeared. But that wasn't the beginning. Not even close. The beginning started years earlier, in a house that smelled like pine sol and silence. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, in a one-story brick house on Ridgecrest Drive, the kind of street where every lawn looked the same and every family pretended to be fine. My father, David Ashford, was a machinist at the plant on Route 41. Quiet man. Big hands. He'd come home smelling like motor oil and always asked me about my day. Before he even sat down, he had this thing where he'd let me press the elevator buttons whenever we went to the bank downtown. It sounds small. It was everything. He died when I was 7. An aneurysm. He was sitting in his truck in the driveway, engine still running, radio playing something by Otis Redding. My mother found him slumped against the steering wheel. I remember standing on the porch in my pajamas, watching the ambulance pull away without its sirens on, and knowing, even at 7, that silence meant something worse than noise. After that, Gloria changed. Not all at once. Slowly, like a house settling into a crack in its foundation. She stopped humming. She stopped asking me about school. She started spending hours at the kitchen table with envelopes and bills, pressing her fingertips into her temples like she was trying to keep her skull from splitting open. 2 years later, Marcus showed up. He managed a used car lot off the interstate. Always had a toothpick between his teeth and a compliment ready for whoever needed one. He brought Gloria flowers every Friday. He told me I was the prettiest little thing in Bibb County. I was 9. I wanted to believe him. The wedding was small. Courthouse ceremony, grocery store cake. I wore a dress Gloria picked out, too tight in the sleeves, and stood beside them while the judge read the vows. No one took my picture. When we got home that night, Marcus sat in my father's chair for the first time. Gloria didn't say a word. Neither did I. The first time Marcus hit me, I was 12. It was over a glass of sweet tea. I'd left it on the counter without a coaster, and the condensation left a ring on the wood. He grabbed my wrist and twisted it behind my back so fast I didn't even have time to flinch. "You think things in this house replace themselves?" he said, his breath hot and sour against my ear. I looked at Gloria. She was standing at the stove, stirring something. She didn't turn around. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was scared of Marcus, because I was scared that if I told someone and Gloria didn't defend me, then it would be real. And I wasn't ready for that yet. So I did what daughters like me learn to do. I shrank. I got quieter. I made myself so small I could fit inside a whisper. Good grades. Clean room. No arguments. I moved through that house like a ghost wearing skin, and I thought, if I'm perfect enough, maybe she'll look at me again. She didn't. What she did instead was worse. When I was 14, I needed my birth certificate for a school trip. I asked Gloria for it. She handed it to me in a manila envelope, face blank. I opened it in my bedroom and saw the name under father, Marcus T. Linden, not David Ashford, my actual father. The man whose voice I could still hear in my sleep, the man who called me little bird and let me press the elevator buttons. His name was gone. I walked into the kitchen holding the paper like it was something fragile and dangerous at the same time. "This isn't right," I said. Gloria poured herself more coffee. It was updated for legal reasons. "Don't be dramatic. Don't be dramatic." She said it like a reflex, like blinking, like she'd rehearsed it in her sleep, and it came out before the thought even formed. I stood there for a long time after she left the room, staring at that document, feeling something inside me rearrange. Not break. Rearrange. Like a bone that heals crooked. At 16, I applied for a nursing scholarship. It was the first time I'd felt hopeful in years. I studied for the entrance evaluation until my eyes burned. I wrote the personal essay 6 times. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Delacroix, said I had a real shot. I checked the mailbox every day for 2 months. Nothing came. Finally, I asked Mrs. Delacroix to look into it. She pulled up the records, squinting at her screen, then looked at me with a face I'll never forget, confusion mixed with something close to grief. Elena, you were awarded the scholarship. The acceptance letter was mailed in March. It was now May. I drove home and went straight to Gloria's sewing room, the one she told me never to enter. I opened the bottom drawer of her desk, the one she kept locked, and found it. A white envelope, my name printed neatly on the front, seal still intact. I ripped it open. Congratulations! Full tuition. Deadline expired 3 weeks ago. I walked into the living room where Gloria was watching television with Marcus. I held up the letter. Her eyes barely moved. You weren't ready, she said. Like she was talking about a haircut. College would have eaten you alive. I saved you the embarrassment. Marcus didn't even look up. He just kept chewing that toothpick. I went back to my room and sat on the floor with the letter in my hands. I didn't cry. I was past crying. Something behind my ribs simply turned off, like a pilot light going out. That same year, a woman named Patricia, someone who'd worked with Gloria at the church office, stopped me in the Food Lion parking lot. She looked around like she was about to commit a crime, then said, quietly, "Your mother did the same thing to her sister. Took over everything. Finances, reputation, relationships. Rosemary doesn't even speak to anyone in the family anymore. Be careful, sweetheart." I stared at her. She squeezed my arm and walked away. I never forgot it. But I didn't act on it either. Not yet. At 18, I graduated. Honors. 3rd in my class. I reserved 2 seats in the gymnasium for Gloria and Marcus. They never came. I stood outside after the ceremony in my cap and gown, watching every other family take pictures and hug and cry. The parking lot emptied out. A janitor started folding up chairs. I walked home in my heels, cap tucked under my arm, past the BP station, past the dollar store, or past the church, where Marcus shook hands with the pastor every Sunday like his knuckles didn't know what a 12-year-old's ribcage felt like. When I got home, Gloria was on the phone. She waved me off like I was a fly. I went to my room, hung my honors cord on the back of my door, and started packing. I left that house 6 weeks later with a duffel bag, $300 from my part-time job at Waffle House, and not a single photograph of my father. Because there were none left in the house. Gloria had removed them all by the time I was 10. I moved to Columbus, Ohio, got my CNA certification, worked nights at a nursing home, saved enough to share a 2-bedroom apartment with a girl named Bree who worked at Target, and never asked too many questions. For the first time in my life, I could breathe in my own home without measuring the volume of my footsteps. I started nursing school on a partial loan. I was exhausted, broke, but I was mine. Gloria called once every few months. Short, transactional conversations. Are you eating? Are you working? Never. Are you happy? Or I miss you. And then one day, when I was 24, she called, and her voice was different. Warm. Soft. Almost musical. "Baby, we want you to come home for Thanksgiving. Marcus and I have been talking. We miss you. We want to start over." I should have known. The sweetness was always the warning sign. But I went. Because the thing about daughters who've been starved of love is that we'll eat crumbs and call it a feast. The table was set with cloth napkins. Gloria had made her mother's cornbread recipe, the one she only pulled out for company. Marcus smiled too wide and called me kid like we were old friends. After dinner, Gloria brought out dessert and a folder. She placed both on the table with equal ceremony. "We found our dream house, baby," she said, hands clasped. Marcus leaned forward. "Just one little thing. With my credit situation, the bank needs a cosigner. Someone stable. Your name would be perfect." "Just a formality." I didn't touch the folder. I'd like to have someone look at this first, I said slowly. Marcus's jaw tightened. You don't trust your own family? I looked at Gloria. She sipped her wine. No rush, baby. But the bank needs an answer by next Friday. I drove back to Columbus that night with the folder on my passenger seat. I never opened it. I just knew. The next week, I told them no. Gloria stopped calling. Marcus stopped pretending. And my life went quiet again. But not peaceful. Quiet the way a house gets before a storm rips the roof off. 3 weeks after I said no, I noticed a login attempt on my email from an unrecognized device. A week after that, the lock on my apartment door was scratched up. Nothing was stolen, but something felt wrong, the way air feels different before lightning. I searched my bedroom. Behind the lamp on my nightstand, taped underneath the shelf that faced my bed, I found it. A tiny black pinhole camera. Green light blinking. Still transmitting. My whole body went cold. Not fear. Something past fear. I ripped it out, dropped it into a glass of water, and called Gloria. My voice was flat. Was this supposed to scare me? Silence. Then a sigh, like I'd embarrassed her at church. A good daughter doesn't keep secrets from her family, she said, especially when she owes them. I don't owe you anything, I said. And I'm not in your house anymore. She hung up. That was the night I stopped being afraid and started being ready. And then came the Tuesday. November. Cold enough that the windows fogged from the inside. Gloria had called 3 more times about the mortgage. Each time I said no. Each time the silence afterward got heavier. Then, Marcus showed up at my apartment unannounced. I don't know how he got in the building. He knocked once, then opened the door like he owned it. He had a copy of the papers. Just sign it, Elena. Stop making this harder than it has to be. I told him to leave. He didn't. He stepped closer. I stepped back, and then I was falling. He'd grabbed me by the shoulder and shoved me toward the hallway, and my feet hit the top of the basement stairs. 12 concrete steps. I remember the sound my collarbone made when I hit the landing. A dry, clean snap. Like a branch breaking in winter. I remember tasting blood. I remember looking up and seeing Gloria at the top, framed in the hallway light. If you'd just signed the papers, Elena, none of this would be happening. The lock clicked. The light went off. I lay there for what felt like hours, my collarbone screaming, blood drying against the concrete. Then, I heard the faint sound of my neighbor, Mrs. Okonkwo, pounding on the front door. Then sirens. I woke up in Mount Carmel East under white lights so bright they felt like accusations. A nurse read the damage like she was reading a receipt. Fractured clavicle, 2 cracked ribs, lacerated lip, mild concussion. We filed a mandatory report, she said, looking at me with steady, kind eyes. The police will want to speak with you. You don't have to do this alone. This time, I didn't say no. This time, I said yes. A detective came within the hour. Young woman, firm handshake, took notes without interrupting. I told her everything. She recorded it. She photographed the bruises. She asked if I wanted to press charges. I said, I want him arrested, and he was. Marcus Linden was taken into custody that same night on charges of felony assault and unlawful entry. Gloria was not there when they brought him in. She was already on the phone, calling family, calling friends, crafting the story. Elena's always been troubled. She fell. She's dramatic. You know how she is. But this time, the story didn't hold. Because there was a police report. Because there were hospital photos. Because Mrs. Okonkwo heard the screaming and called 911 before Gloria could rewrite the scene. In the hospital, I started my file. Not a diary. Diaries are for people still hoping someone will listen. This was a case. I listed everything. The birth certificate, the scholarship letter, the hidden camera, the emails, the financial records I'd started pulling after the Thanksgiving dinner, the ones that showed Gloria had opened 3 credit cards in my name when I was 16. She'd maxed out every single one. $12,000 of debt I never knew existed, wrecking the credit score I'd been building since I got my first job. I wrote it all down in a black composition notebook. On the first page, in block letters, I wrote, She never screamed. she just erased. A week after leaving the hospital, I got a call from a woman I hadn't spoken to in 17 years. My father's younger sister, Aunt Camille. She'd seen a local news blurb about the assault charge and tracked me down. "Elena, I've been trying to reach you since you were 10, she said, her voice shaking. "Your mother told me you didn't want contact. She told the whole family you were in a special program, that you needed space." I sat down on the edge of my bed, the phone trembling in my hand. "She told me you'd all moved away," I whispered, "that you didn't want anything to do with me after Dad died." Silence. Then Camille said something that broke me open. "Your father set up an education trust for you before he died. $22,000, held at First National in Macon. Gloria was the custodian until you turned 18. She emptied it when you were 15. I found out 2 years ago, but I had no way to reach you. $22,000. Enough for nursing school without loans. Enough for a clean start. Gone. Taken by the woman who told me college would eat me alive." I hung up the phone and sat in the dark for a long time. Then I got up, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. Legal. Through Camille, I found an attorney named James Whitfield, pro bono, specializing in financial abuse within families. He was methodical, quiet, and when he read through my file, he didn't flinch. He just nodded and said, "We have more than enough." I also reconnected with someone I thought I'd lost forever. My best friend from middle school, Nadia. Gloria had cut her off when we were 13, told me Nadia was a bad influence and that her family wasn't our kind. Nadia found me through a mutual friend and sent a message. "I never stopped wondering what happened to you. We met at a coffee shop in German Village. She looked the same, warm eyes, quick laugh. She brought a box. Inside was a stack of letters she'd written to me in 8th grade, returned unopened by Gloria. Every single one stamped return to sender in Gloria's handwriting. I held them in my hands and felt the full weight of what had been stolen. Not just money, not just opportunity, connection. Every relationship Gloria couldn't control, she severed. The weeks before the court date were slow and surgical. James compiled the case into 3 binders, one for the criminal charges against Marcus, felony assault, unlawful entry, destruction of property, one for the civil complaint against Gloria, identity theft, financial fraud, interference with educational opportunity, intentional emotional harm, coercive control, and one for the trust fund, misappropriation of a minor's protected assets. I organized everything by date, every screenshot, every letter, every financial record. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because for the first time in my life, my truth had a filing system. The Bibb County Courthouse smelled like floor wax and burned coffee. I wore a navy blouse and the only pair of flats I owned. No jewelry, no makeup. James met me outside with the binders. Nadia drove me there and squeezed my hand before I walked through the double doors. Gloria and Marcus were already seated at the defendant's table. She wore a cream-colored blouse, soft, pastoral, like she was headed to Sunday service. Marcus sat rigid, jaw locked, staring straight ahead. There was one empty seat behind them. My younger half-brother, Tyler, wasn't there. I took the stand. I placed my right hand on the Bible, and I told them everything. I spoke about the scholarship that disappeared into a drawer, the birth certificate rewritten to erase my father's name, the credit cards opened in my name before I could legally vote, the trust fund emptied before I turned 16, the camera in my bedroom, the boot shoved down 12 concrete stairs while my mother watched from the top and told me it was my fault. I wasn't just ignored, I said, looking directly at Gloria. I was systematically removed from my own life. Gloria's attorney, a man in a charcoal suit who smelled like expensive cologne, stood up and tried the usual angle. "Miss Ashford, would you describe yourself as someone who tends to see situations through a particularly emotional lens?" "I brought 3 binders of documentation," I said. "If I'm emotional, I'm also organized." He didn't have a follow-up. James presented the evidence. Bank statements showing the trust fund withdrawals, dated and signed by Gloria. Credit card applications with my forged signature, opened when I was 16. The scholarship letter, still in its original envelope, seal broken only by me, years too late. Screenshots of Gloria's texts. "Stop being difficult. You owe this family." A good daughter doesn't say no. The returned letters from Nadia, stamped in Gloria's handwriting. The police report from the night of the assault. The hospital photographs. And then James pulled out one last piece of evidence. A voicemail. Left on Camille's phone, 3 years earlier by Gloria. James hit play. The courtroom went still. Gloria's voice filled the room, casual, almost bored. Camille, stop calling about the trust. David's money is gone. It went to the house, the car, things Elena benefited from, whether she knows it or not. She's not your concern. She's mine. Mine. Like I was property. Like I was a line item on a budget she'd already spent. The judge took her time. Then she spoke. This court finds sufficient evidence of sustained psychological manipulation, financial fraud, and coercive control. Marcus Linden is sentenced to 4 years in state prison for felony assault and unlawful entry. Gloria Linden is ordered to pay full restitution of the misappropriated trust fund, plus compensatory damages for emotional harm, identity theft, and interference with educational opportunity. A permanent restraining order is issued against both defendants. 4 years. Not a restraining order. Not a slap on the wrist. Prison. Marcus's face went white. Gloria's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. For the first time in her life, she had nothing rehearsed. Outside the courthouse, James shook my hand. You did something most people never get the courage to do, he said. Nadia hugged me so hard I felt my cracked ribs protest, and I didn't care. You're free, she said. I know, I whispered. But I've been building this freedom for a long time. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my notebook to the last page. I crossed out. She never screamed. She just erased. And underneath, I wrote, but I wrote myself back in. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Tyler, my half-brother. We'd never been close. Gloria had made sure of that, keeping us in separate emotional zip codes, telling him I was unstable, telling me he didn't care. His message was 4 words. I read everything. Sorry. I replied, you didn't know. That's not your fault. He didn't respond right away. But the next morning, he sent a longer message. He said he'd found the credit card statements in Gloria's office. He said she'd done something similar to him, a smaller scale, but the same pattern. Control, secrecy, debt in his name. He said he was looking into his options. I told him about James Whitfield. I told him he didn't have to be alone in it. The silence between us was still wide, but it wasn't hostile anymore. It was the silence of 2 people learning to see each other without the filter their mother had. 3 months after the trial, I stood in front of a room of 11 women at the Franklin County Community Center. The chairs were mismatched. The coffee was bad. The fluorescent lights buzzed like trapped insects. Behind me, taped to the wall, was a banner I'd made from butcher paper and a borrowed laminator. It read, "The first person who has to believe you is you." I introduced myself. My name is Elena. I'm a nurse. I'm 25. And for most of my life, I believed I was the problem. I told them the short version. Not to shock, not for pity, but because silence is a habit that only breaks when someone else goes first. When I finished, a woman in the second row uncrossed her arms. Then another woman raised her hand and said, "My mother did the same thing with my college fund." Then another. Then another. We talked for an hour and a half. Raw, unpolished, sometimes barely coherent, but honest. Afterward, a girl lingered near the exit. 17, maybe 18, oversized hoodie, arms pulled inside the sleeves, chin low. I recognized the posture. I'd worn it for 15 years. I walked over. "You okay?" She barely nodded. Then, so quietly, I almost missed it. I still live with her. She didn't need to say who. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a list of resources I'd put together with James. Hotlines, legal aid, shelters, everything I wished someone had handed me when I was her age. "You don't have to use it today," I said. "Just keep it until you're ready." She took it. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded and slipped out the door. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. That evening, I drove to Schiller Park. The sun was low, the kind of golden light that makes even parking lots look beautiful. I sat on a bench near the pond and opened my journal. It was almost full now. Every page marked with ink and memory, grief and recovery, confusion and clarity. I turned to the last blank page and wrote one line. You don't need an apology to move forward. You just need proof you survived. I tore the page out carefully, folded it into a small paper crane. I wasn't good at origami, but I'd practiced this one. I held it in my palms for a moment, feeling the weight of everything it carried. Then I opened my hands and let the wind take it. It lifted, spun once, caught an updraft, and drifted out over the water. I watched it until it was just a white speck against the gray-blue surface of the pond. I sat there for a while. No audience. No grand moment. Just breath. Just space. Just life. Finally moving forward. I didn't get the apology. I didn't need the apology. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy. And now I know. Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are the ones who taught you to call them family. If you've ever been made invisible in your own home, erased by the people who were supposed to protect you, let this be your reminder. Silence doesn't save you. Truth does. And healing doesn't start with someone else's sorry. It starts the moment you stop waiting for one. What would you do if the person who was supposed to love you the most was the one dismantling your life from the inside? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to RS Revenge Story for more true stories that speak what others are afraid to say.